Teen's psychic warning saves her from doctor's deadly secret. You won't believe what he did. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button because you're about to witness the most terrifying psychological thriller that actually happened. This story has more twists than a DNA strand, and I guarantee the ending will leave you speechless. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, because this journey will change how you look at the people you trust most. The scream pierced through the sterile silence of Mercy General's psychiatric wing at exactly 2:47 p.m. Dr. Sarah, don't drink that coffee. Sarah Chen froze with the paper cup halfway to her lips, her tired brown eyes darting toward the voice. Emma Walsh sat bolt upright in her chair across the therapy room, her 16-year-old face pale with terror, dark hair clinging to her sweating forehead. Emma, what's wrong? Sarah set the cup down on her desk, concern flooding her voice. The coffee. There's something wrong with it. I can feel it. This was the 4th time this month that Emma had experienced one of her episodes. What the medical files called acute anxiety with paranoid features. But what Sarah had begun to suspect was something far more complex. Emma Walsh had been under Sarah's care for 6 months now, ever since social services had placed the orphaned teenager in the state psychiatric facility. According to her records, Emma suffered from mild schizophrenia with auditory hallucinations, voices that warned her about dangers that never seemed to materialize. Except they had been materializing. 3 weeks ago, Emma had refused to let Sarah take the elevator, insisting the cables were wrong. 20 minutes later, the elevator had malfunctioned, trapping Dr. Morrison and 2 nurses for 4 hours. Last week, Emma had warned Sarah not to go to the parking garage after dark. That same night, a patient had escaped and assaulted a security guard in that exact location. Sarah studied the coffee cup, her scientific mind warring with a growing intuition that Emma's warnings weren't delusions at all. Emma, I need you to tell me exactly what you're sensing. The teenager's hands trembled as she gripped the arms of her chair. It tastes wrong, bitter, like medicine that's not supposed to be medicine. Sarah picked up the cup and examined it closely. The coffee looked normal, the same dark roast from the machine in the staff break room that she'd been drinking for 2 years. But Emma's track record was becoming impossible to ignore. Where did this coffee come from, Emma? Did you see who made it? The tall doctor, the one with the kind eyes who always asks about me. Sarah's blood went cold. Dr. James Morrison was the only tall doctor who regularly inquired about Emma's progress. He was also the one who had been pushing for Emma to be transferred to a more specialized facility, one that Sarah had never heard of despite her 15 years in psychiatric medicine. Sarah set the cup down and walked to her office door, turning the lock with a soft click. Emma's eyes widened. Dr. Sarah, are you scared too? For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. Yes, Emma, I think I am. Sarah Chen had built her career on facts, evidence, and clinical observation. At 52, she was one of the most respected neuropsychologists in Minneapolis, specializing in trauma-related disorders among veterans and accident survivors. She understood the intricate ways that trauma could rewire the human brain, creating symptoms that seemed supernatural, but were rooted in very real neurological adaptations. But Emma Walsh was challenging everything Sarah thought she knew about the line between intuition and delusion. Sarah had first encountered Emma through the most tragic of circumstances. The teenager had been found wandering Highway 94 in a dissociative state with no memory of how she'd gotten there and no identification except for a bracelet with the name Emma engraved on it. She'd been coherent enough to provide the last name Walsh, but claimed no memory of her family or past. What had struck Sarah immediately was Emma's unusual sensitivity to her environment. The teenager could sense mood changes in staff members before they were apparent to trained professionals. She knew when patients were about to have episodes, when medications were affecting people adversely, when the atmosphere in the ward was becoming volatile. Sarah had initially attributed these abilities to hypervigilance, a common trait among trauma survivors. But as the months passed, Emma's accuracy had become statistically impossible to explain through conventional psychology. Emma, I want you to think carefully. When you get these feelings, these warnings, what exactly do you experience? Emma hugged her knees to her chest, a gesture that made her look even younger than her 16 years. It's like someone is whispering, but not with words, more like feelings getting pushed into my head. Sometimes I see flashes of things that haven't happened yet, but feel like memories. And with the coffee, I saw you drinking it, and then I saw you falling. Not just falling asleep, falling like you couldn't wake up. And the tall doctor was standing over you writing on a clipboard. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. Emma, has Dr. Morrison ever spoken to you directly outside of our group sessions? Sometimes he asks me questions about my dreams about the things I see. He always seems very interested when I tell him about the warnings. The pieces were forming a pattern that Sarah didn't want to acknowledge. Morrison's unusual interest in Emma's case. His repeated suggestions that Emma needed specialized treatment. His presence whenever Emma had a particularly vivid episode. And now potentially his involvement in doctoring Sarah's coffee. Sarah moved to her computer and began pulling up Morrison's file. As a colleague, she had limited access to his personnel records, but what she could see raised immediate red flags. Dr. James Morrison had joined Mercy General 18 months ago with credentials from a psychiatric research facility in Boston that Sarah had never heard of. His previous work had focused on enhanced cognitive abilities in trauma populations, a field that seemed to have very little published research. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever felt like Dr. Morrison was studying you, like you were a subject rather than a patient? Emma's response was immediate and chilling. Every time he looks at me, I feel like a bug under a microscope. And Dr. Sarah, sometimes I dream about other people like me, other people he's been watching. Sarah's hands stilled on the keyboard. Other people like you. People who can sense things, but in my dreams they're all very quiet now, like they went to sleep and never woke up. The coffee cup sat on Sarah's desk like an accusation. She thought about the past few months, how she'd been increasingly tired despite adequate sleep, how her usually sharp memory had been fuzzy around the edges, how she'd been having trouble concentrating during patient sessions, how she'd been drinking coffee that Morrison often prepared and delivered to her office. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I think we might both be in danger. The teenager's eyes widened, but she didn't look surprised. I know. That's why I've been trying to warn you. Sarah began formulating a plan. She needed to get Emma out of the facility safely, and she needed evidence of whatever Morrison was doing. But first, she needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Emma, when you have these abilities, can you control them? Can you try to see something specific? Sometimes. It's easier when I'm scared or when someone I care about is in danger. I need you to try to see Dr. Morrison. Try to see what he's planning. Emma closed her eyes, her breathing becoming deep and rhythmic. Sarah watched fascinated despite the danger as the teenager's face became eerily peaceful. Then Emma's eyes snapped open, filled with terror. Dr. Sarah, we have to leave right now. He's coming and he has other people with him. They have needles. As if summoned by Emma's words, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of the electronic lock on her office door being overridden. A master key or administrative access. Sarah grabbed Emma's hand. The window. Can we get to the fire escape? No, they're out there too. Emma's voice was utterly calm despite the terror in her words. But there's another way. The old service elevator in the basement. It connects to the tunnel system. How do you know about that? I dream about this building sometimes. I think I've been here before. The door handle turned slowly, and Sarah realized that whatever was happening had been planned for much longer than she'd imagined. Dr. James Morrison stepped into the office, his usually kind expression replaced by something clinical and cold. Behind him stood two orderlies that Sarah didn't recognize, large men in scrubs who looked more like security than medical staff. Sarah, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Morrison said, his voice carrying a note of genuine regret. But Emma's condition has progressed beyond what we can manage in a standard facility. What condition? Sarah stepped protectively in front of Emma. Emma is making excellent progress with traditional therapy. Sarah, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Emma has been demonstrating abilities that require specialized study for her own safety and the safety of others. You mean her intuition, her sensitivity to environmental cues. Those aren't symptoms, James. They're adaptations. Morrison's smile was patient, condescending. Sarah, you're a brilliant psychologist, but you're not equipped to handle this level of enhancement. Emma needs to be somewhere she can be properly studied and cared for. Studied? The word came out sharper than Sarah intended. James, Emma is a patient, not a research subject. Emma is a remarkable young woman with abilities that could benefit countless people if properly understood and developed. Emma's hand tightened in Sarah's. Dr. Sarah, he's lying. He doesn't want to help people. He wants to make more people like me, but he keeps breaking them. Morrison's expression hardened. Emma, you're going to need to come with us now. Your guardian has already signed the transfer papers. Emma doesn't have a guardian. She's a ward of the state. Actually, Sarah, I've been appointed as Emma's temporary guardian while we sort out her placement. The paperwork was filed this morning. The manipulation was breathtaking in its completeness. Morrison had been planning this for months, positioning himself legally to take custody of Emma while undermining Sarah's authority as her treating physician. I won't let you take her. Sarah, you don't have a choice. And honestly, given your recent performance issues, the memory lapses, the concentration problems, the increasing paranoia, you might want to consider some time off yourself. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Morrison had been documenting her symptoms that he had likely been causing through whatever he'd been putting in her coffee. Emma, stay behind me, Sarah said quietly. Dr. Sarah, the service elevator. Tell them you need to get your coat from the basement storage. Sarah looked at Morrison, calculating. If you're going to take Emma, I want to get her personal belongings from storage. She has some things in the basement that belong to her family. Morrison considered this. 5 minutes. Johnson and Stevens will accompany you. As they moved toward the elevator, Emma whispered urgently, When we get to the basement, run toward the old wing. There's a door marked authorized personnel only. I'll tell you when. The elevator descended slowly, the silence broken only by the mechanical whir of the cables. Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about Morrison, everything that hadn't added up over the past months. His unusual interest in patients with enhanced cognitive abilities. His requests for detailed reports on their dreams, their intuitions, their unexplained knowledge. His frustrated reactions when patients were successfully treated and no longer displayed the symptoms he found so fascinating. Morrison wasn't trying to help people like Emma. He was collecting them. The elevator shuddered to a stop at the basement level, and the doors opened to reveal a dimly lit corridor that Sarah had never seen before. This was clearly an older part of the hospital with institutional green paint peeling from the walls and the musty smell of disuse. The storage room is this way, Sarah lied, moving confidently down the hallway, as if she knew where she was going. Emma squeezed her hand once, then twice. The signal. Now, Emma whispered. Sarah broke into a run, pulling Emma with her toward a door marked with faded lettering that she couldn't quite read in the dim light. Behind them she heard shouting and the heavy footsteps of the orderlies giving chase. The door was unlocked, opening to reveal a staircase that led deeper into the building's infrastructure. Sarah and Emma took the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. Where does this lead? Sarah asked as they reached a lower level that seemed to be part of the hospital's original foundation. Tunnels, Emma said, breathing hard. They connect to the old psychiatric wing that was shut down in the 90s. Dr. Sarah, there's something else I need to tell you. What? I lied about not remembering my past. I remember everything, including the last time I was in this hospital. Sarah stopped running. Emma, what are you talking about? My name really is Emma Walsh, but I'm not 16. I'm 19. And 2 years ago, Dr. Morrison did to me exactly what he's trying to do now. The revelation hit Sarah like ice water. You escaped. I escaped, but not before I saw what he does to people like me. Dr. Sarah, we have to stop him, because if we don't, he's going to keep collecting people until he figures out how to create us artificially. Create what? People who can see the future. People who can sense danger. People who can... Emma paused, her eyes distant. People who can change things just by knowing they're going to happen. Sarah stared at Emma, really looked at her for the first time. The teenager's bone structure was more mature than she'd initially noticed. Her vocabulary and emotional sophistication had always seemed advanced for 16, and her knowledge of the hospital's layout was far too detailed for someone who had supposedly arrived 6 months ago with no memory. Emma, how many others were there? In my group 7, I'm the only one who got away. What happened to the others? Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. He pushed them too hard, trying to enhance their abilities with drugs and electroshock therapy. Their minds couldn't handle it. They died? Worse, they're still alive, but they're not there anymore. He keeps them in the old wing, uses them for research. They can still sense things, but they can't communicate, can't take care of themselves. Sarah felt sick. Emma, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you go to the police? I tried, but Morrison has connections, documentation, medical explanations for everything. Who's going to believe a traumatized teenager with a psychiatric history over a respected doctor? The sound of footsteps echoed down the stairwell above them, getting closer. This way, Emma said, leading Sarah deeper into the tunnel system. There's something I need to show you, evidence that even Morrison can't explain away. As they moved through the underground corridors, Sarah processed the magnitude of what Emma was telling her. Morrison wasn't just studying people with enhanced intuition. He was trying to create them artificially using the natural abilities of people like Emma as a baseline for his experiments. Emma, these abilities you have, were you born with them? No. That's the thing Morrison doesn't understand. None of us were born this way. We all developed these abilities after severe trauma. It's like our brains rewired themselves to detect danger because we'd been in so much danger. Sarah's scientific mind immediately grasped the implications. So Morrison is trying to artificially create trauma responses. Worse, he's trying to skip the trauma and go straight to the enhanced cognition. But it doesn't work that way. The abilities are connected to the emotional processing of the original trauma. When he tries to force it, the subject's minds break. Exactly. They emerged from the tunnels into what appeared to be the basement of the old psychiatric wing. The air was stale and carried the distinctive smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with something else, something organic and unpleasant. Emma, what is that smell? The research subjects. Morrison keeps them sedated most of the time, but they still need basic care. Emma led Sarah to a reinforced door with a small window. Look, but don't make any noise. Sarah peered through the glass and immediately wished she hadn't. The room beyond contained 6 hospital beds, each occupied by a person in their teens or 20s. They were clean and appeared to be medically stable, but their eyes held an emptiness that Sarah recognized from her most severe catatonic patients. Oh my God, Sarah whispered. The girl in the second bed is Jessica. She could predict stock market fluctuations with 90% accuracy. The boy by the window is Marcus. He could sense people's emotional states from across a room. They were all like me, Dr. Sarah, and now they're vegetables. Morrison calls them subjects in a persistent research state. He thinks he can still figure out how to replicate their abilities without causing the cognitive damage. Sarah felt a fury building in her chest that she hadn't experienced since her residency when she'd first encountered the worst cases of abuse and neglect. Emma, we're going to stop him, but first I need to know something. Are you really 19? Yes, and Dr. Sarah. My real last name isn't Walsh. It's Morrison. The world tilted around Sarah. You're his daughter. Stepdaughter. My mother married him when I was 14. When my abilities started manifesting after my father's death, Morrison became interested. At first I thought he was trying to help me cope with the loss. Then I realized I was his first test subject. Emma, when I escaped 2 years ago, I changed my appearance, my age, my identity. I've been planning to come back and expose him ever since. Why didn't you just disappear? Start a new life somewhere safe. Emma's eyes hardened with a determination that looked far older than 19. Because he's my stepfather, and he's a monster, and because those people in there deserve to be free, even if it's too late to save them. The sound of the basement door opening echoed through the corridor behind them. They found the tunnel entrance, Emma said calmly. Dr. Sarah, whatever happens next, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll make sure the world knows what Morrison is doing, even if something happens to me. Sarah took Emma's hand, struck by how adult the young woman's grip felt. Nothing is going to happen to you. We're going to get out of here and we're going to stop Morrison together. Dr. Sarah, there's one more thing I need to tell you about why Morrison has been targeting you specifically. What do you mean? He knows about your past, about your family. Sarah's blood went cold. What about my family? Your husband David and your son Tommy, the car accident 8 years ago. Morrison knows it wasn't really an accident. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The secret she'd carried for 8 years, the truth she'd never told anyone, not even her therapist. How could he possibly know that? Because he's been studying you for longer than you realize. And Dr. Sarah, He knows that you've been experiencing enhanced intuition since the accident. You just haven't recognized it yet. Sarah thought about the past few months. Her unusual accuracy in diagnosing patients, her ability to sense when someone was lying, her inexplicable knowledge of Emma's needs before Emma expressed them. Emma, that's not possible. Enhanced intuition isn't something that just develops in middle age. It is when the trauma is severe enough, and when someone loses their entire family in a single night because they ignored their own intuitive warning. That's severe trauma, Dr. Sarah. The memory crashed over Sarah like a tidal wave. The night of the accident, the strange feeling she'd had about David's mental state, the way he'd insisted on driving despite the storm, despite her vague sense of unease. How she'd dismissed her own concerns as overprotectiveness. How she'd learned later that David had been planning his suicide for weeks, intending to take Tommy with him because he couldn't bear the thought of leaving his son alone. How Sarah had survived because at the last moment some instinct had made her insist on taking her own car to meet them at Tommy's school play. Morrison has been watching you since then, Emma continued, waiting for your abilities to fully manifest. The coffee was just the beginning. He's been planning to add you to his collection. His collection of what? Adults with naturally developing enhanced cognition. He thinks you and I together might be the key to perfecting his process. The basement door slammed open and Morrison's voice echoed through the corridor. Sarah, Emma, this has gone far enough. Come out now and no one needs to get hurt. Emma pulled Sarah deeper into the old wing toward a staircase that led upward. There's one more level, Morrison's real laboratory. If we can get up there, we can access his computer system and get the evidence we need. Emma, even if we get evidence, how do we get out of here alive? Emma smiled, and for the first time since Sarah had known her, the expression looked genuinely confident rather than fearful. Dr. Sarah, I didn't just escape from Morrison 2 years ago. I learned things while I was his captive. Things about how to use abilities like ours offensively, not just defensively. What do you mean? I mean Morrison is about to learn that the people he's been studying are much more dangerous than he ever imagined. As they climbed the stairs toward Morrison's laboratory, Sarah realized that everything she'd thought she knew about her young patient had been wrong. Emma Walsh wasn't a traumatized teenager who needed protection. She was a skilled survivor who had spent 2 years planning her revenge. And Sarah was about to become her partner in bringing down one of the most dangerous predators she'd ever encountered. The only question was whether they could accomplish their mission before Morrison's research claimed 2 more victims. The laboratory on the 4th floor of the abandoned wing looked like something from a science fiction nightmare. Banks of computer monitors displayed brainwave patterns, heart rate variabilities, and neural activity maps. Along one wall, glass cases contained what appeared to be experimental medications in various stages of development. The air hummed with the white noise of electronic equipment that had been running continuously for months. But it was the center of the room that made Sarah's blood run cold. 7 chairs arranged in a circle, each equipped with restraints and what appeared to be electroshock therapy equipment. Above each chair, monitors displayed names and photographs. 6 of the photos matched the faces Sarah had seen in the basement. The 7th chair had a photo of Emma, and on a nearby desk, a folder labeled S. Chen, Subject Integration Protocol. He's been planning this for months, Sarah whispered. Emma moved to one of the computer terminals with the familiarity of someone who had been there before. Not months, years. Morrison has been developing this program since before he even met my mother. Emma, how did your mother die? Emma's fingers paused over the keyboard. Car accident. 6 months after I escaped from here the first time. Morrison said she was distraught over my disappearance, lost control of the vehicle on a wet road. But you don't believe that? I know my mother had been asking questions about Morrison's work. She'd found some of his research notes in their home office. And Dr. Sarah told... Emma turned to face her. My mother was the most careful driver I'd ever known. She wouldn't have lost control of a car unless something else was wrong. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Morrison killed your mother. I can't prove it, but yes, I believe he did, and I think he's been planning to complete his research using me ever since. Emma pulled up files on Morrison's computer, her access suggesting she'd maintained some kind of back door into his system. What appeared on the screen made Sarah's stomach turn. Morrison's research wasn't just about studying people with enhanced cognitive abilities. He was documenting a systematic process for artificially inducing the kind of severe trauma that seemed to trigger these abilities in the first place. Emma, this is torture. It's worse than torture. Torture has a purpose, to extract information or force compliance. This is trauma induction for the purpose of neurological experimentation. The files detailed Morrison's methodology with clinical precision. He had identified that enhanced intuitive abilities seemed to develop in approximately 3% of severe trauma survivors. His goal was to determine the specific neurological conditions that allowed this development, then replicate those conditions artificially. His test subjects had been exposed to carefully calibrated psychological and physical stressors designed to mimic the worst kinds of human trauma. Sleep deprivation, sensory overload, isolation, chemical manipulation of fear responses, and controlled exposure to life-threatening situations. Sarah, look at this. Emma had opened a video file dated 3 months earlier. The footage showed one of the basement subjects, the young woman Emma had identified as Jessica, in one of the laboratory chairs. She appeared conscious, but deeply distressed electrodes attached to her head, while Morrison's voice provided narration. Subject J7 Day 43 of Enhanced Cognition Induction Protocol. Previous subject demonstrated 67% accuracy in predictive modeling. Today we're testing the effects of increased electrical stimulation on precognitive response time. The video showed Jessica suddenly convulsing, her eyes rolling back as the machines around her registered dangerous spikes in brain activity. Morrison's voice remained calm, clinical. Excessive electrical input appears to cause seizure activity, reducing stimulus and administering anticonvulsants. He's giving them seizures on purpose, Sarah said, her voice hollow with horror. That video was recorded a week before Jessica went catatonic, Emma said quietly. Morrison's notes indicate he considered her a partial success because she maintained some predictive ability even after the brain damage. Sarah moved to another computer terminal and began accessing Morrison's email communications. What she found there revealed the true scope of his operation. Morrison wasn't working alone. He was part of a network of researchers at various institutions, all working on different aspects of what they called cognitive enhancement through controlled trauma induction. His collaborators included psychiatrists, neurologists, and even some government contractors interested in developing psychic soldiers. Emma, this goes beyond Morrison. There are at least 12 other researchers involved in similar projects across the country. I know. That's why we can't just expose Morrison and walk away. If we don't get all of them, they'll just relocate and start over. Emma pulled up another file, a list of potential subjects that Morrison and his colleagues had been monitoring. The list contained over 200 names, complete with psychological profiles, trauma histories, and what Morrison termed enhancement potential ratings. Sarah's name was on the list with a rating of 9.2 out of 10. Emma, why is my rating so high? Because you've already demonstrated enhanced abilities without realizing it. Morrison has been documenting your diagnostic accuracy, your ability to predict patient behaviors, your responses to environmental stimuli. He thinks you're a natural who just needs the right trigger to fully manifest. Sarah thought about the past 8 years since David and Tommy's death, the strange intuitions that had guided her career decisions, the uncanny ability to connect with patients who had been resistant to other therapists, the dreams that sometimes contained information she couldn't have known consciously. The coffee he's been giving me, mild psychoactive compounds designed to increase neural plasticity and stress response. He's been priming your brain for the more intensive protocols. A sound from the stairwell made them both freeze, footsteps moving slowly and deliberately upward. How much time do we need to download all of this? Sarah asked. At least 10 minutes for the full database. But Dr. Sarah, there's something else we need to do while we're here. What? We need to wake up the others. Sarah stared at Emma. Wake them up. Emma, those people have suffered severe neurological damage. Even if we could reverse their catatonic states, they might not be functional enough to help themselves. You don't understand. They're not catatonic because of brain damage. They're catatonic because Morrison has been keeping them sedated. Their minds are intact. They're just trapped. Emma led Sarah to a medical cabinet filled with various pharmaceuticals. Morrison uses a combination of sedatives and psychotropic drugs to keep them compliant. If we can counteract those medications... Emma, even if that's true, we're talking about 6 people who have been chemically restrained for months or years. The withdrawal alone could kill them. Dr. Sarah, I've been in that basement. I've felt their minds. They're still there, still aware, still suffering. We can't leave them like that. The footsteps on the stairs were getting closer, accompanied by voices. Morrison and at least 2 other people. "Emma, we don't have time for this. We need to get the evidence and get out." The evidence won't matter if Morrison just relocates his operation. Those people downstairs are the only witnesses to what he's really been doing. Sarah looked at Emma and saw the same determination she'd witnessed in her most successful patients. People who had decided that survival wasn't enough, that they needed to fight back against the systems that had victimized them. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me carry these medications downstairs. I know the dosages needed to counteract what Morrison has been giving them, but I need your medical expertise to administer them safely." They grabbed armfuls of medication vials and syringes along with the portable hard drive containing Morrison's research files. As they moved toward the back staircase, Morrison's voice echoed from the main corridor. "Sarah, I know you're up there. You've seen my work now, so you understand how important this research is. We're on the verge of a breakthrough that could change human cognitive evolution." Emma led Sarah down a narrow service staircase that connected directly to the basement level. "Don't listen to him. Morrison thinks he's conducting legitimate research, but he's lost all perspective on human dignity and medical ethics." "Emma, what if you're wrong about the others? What if they really are brain damaged? Then we give them the dignity of dying as themselves, instead of living as Morrison's laboratory animals." They reached the basement and approached the reinforced door of the research subject containment area. Emma produced a key card from her pocket. "How do you have access to this room?" "I lifted Morrison's backup card 2 years ago when I escaped. He never changed the security codes." The room beyond the door was even more disturbing up close. The 6 subjects lay in hospital beds by lines feeding them nutrients and medications, their eyes open but completely unresponsive. Monitors tracked their vital signs and brain activity, showing patterns that suggested consciousness despite their apparent catatonia. "Emma, these brainwave readings, they show active thought processes." "Exactly. Morrison has been keeping them chemically paralyzed while maintaining their cognitive function. He's been using them as living test subjects for his enhancement protocols." Sarah moved to the nearest bed where a young man who appeared to be in his early 20s lay staring at the ceiling. His chart identified him as Marcus Williams, age 22, admitted 14 months earlier with treatment-resistant schizophrenia. "Marcus," Sarah said softly, taking his hand. "Can you hear me?" There was no visible response, but Sarah felt a slight pressure. Marcus was trying to squeeze her hand. "He's aware," Sarah breathed. "Emma, they're all aware." "I know. That's why we have to help them." Emma began preparing syringes with medications designed to counteract the sedatives and psychotropic drugs in the subject's systems. Sarah checked their charts, calculating dosages based on body weight and medication history. "Emma, if we do this, there's no going back. Once Morrison realizes what we've done, he'll have no choice but to try to stop us permanently." He was already planning to stop us permanently. At least this way we fight back. They moved systematically from bed to bed, administering the counteractive medications while monitoring vital signs for adverse reactions. As they worked, Sarah heard Morrison's voice echoing through the building's intercom system. "Sarah, you're making a terrible mistake. Those subjects require careful medical supervision. If you interfere with their treatment protocols, you could cause permanent damage or death." "He's trying to make us doubt ourselves," Emma said. "It's the same technique he used when I was his captive. Create uncertainty about your own perceptions, make you dependent on his interpretation of reality." As Sarah administered the medication to Jessica, the young woman who had been Morrison's stock market predictor, she noticed something remarkable. Jessica's brainwave patterns were changing, becoming more active and organized. "Emma, I think it's working." "How long before they're conscious enough to move?" "Based on the half-life of these medications, probably 20 to 30 minutes. Emma checked her watch. "We need to hold Morrison off until then." "How do we do that?" "We use the one advantage we have that Morrison doesn't expect." "Which is?" Emma smiled and Sarah saw something almost predatory in the expression. "We use our abilities offensively." Emma led Sarah to the laboratory's main computer terminal and began typing rapidly. "Morrison has been so focused on studying and replicating our abilities that he's never considered how they might be used against him." "Emma, what are you doing?" "I'm activating every security system in this building simultaneously. Every alarm, every lockdown protocol, every emergency notification system. Morrison might be able to control the abandoned wing, but the rest of Mercy General is still functioning normally." Suddenly, the building erupted in sound. Fire alarms, security alerts, medical emergency notifications, and automated lockdown announcements all began broadcasting at once. The cacophony was deafening but purposeful. The main hospital will send security to investigate. Morrison will have to either abort his operation or risk exposure to the entire hospital staff. But even as the alarms blared, Sarah heard new sounds. Heavy footsteps, multiple voices, and what sounded like equipment being moved through the corridors above them. "Emma, I don't think Morrison is planning to abort anything." Emma's face went pale as she realized what Sarah had understood. "He's not just going to try to stop us. He's going to eliminate all the evidence, including the research subjects, including us." The first of the basement subjects began stirring. Marcus Williams blinked several times, then turned his head toward Sarah with obvious effort. "Where?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Sarah said, helping him sit up slowly. "We're going to get you out of here." Around the room, the other subjects were beginning to show signs of consciousness. Jessica was trying to speak. A young man identified as David Kim was attempting to move his arms. "Emma, they're waking up, but they're not going to be mobile for at least another 15 minutes. "Then we hold the room until they are." Sarah looked around the basement containment area. It had clearly been designed as a secure facility. Reinforced doors, no windows, limited access points. Morrison could easily trap them here. "Emma, is there another way out of this room?" "There's a service tunnel that connects to the old morgue. But Dr. Sarah, I need to tell you something else about my abilities." "What?" "When I'm under extreme stress, when people I care about are in immediate danger, I can do more than just sense the future. I can influence probability." Sarah stared at Emma. "What does that mean?" "It means I can make unlikely things more likely to happen, like security systems malfunctioning at exactly the right moment, like Morrison making mistakes he wouldn't normally make, like finding escape routes that shouldn't exist." "Emma, that's not possible." "Dr. Sarah, 6 months ago, you would have said that predicting the future wasn't possible either." Before Sarah could respond, the reinforced door to the containment room began to open. Morrison stood in the doorway, flanked by his 2 orderlies and 3 people Sarah didn't recognize. Men in suits who looked more like corporate security than hospital staff. "Sarah, step away from the subjects. You're interfering with a legitimate medical research project." "Legitimate research doesn't involve keeping people chemically paralyzed for months while you experiment on their brains." Morrison's expression hardened. "You don't understand the scope of what we're accomplishing here. These subjects have capabilities that could revolutionize human consciousness. They're willing to sacrifice for the greater good." "They're not willing," Emma said, standing up from where she'd been monitoring Jessica's recovery. "They never consented to this. You kidnapped them, James." Morrison's face went white when he realized who he was looking at. "Emma Morrison, I should have known you'd eventually come back." "Hello, stepfather. You always were too stubborn for your own good. Just like your mother." The casual admission hung in the air like a confession. Morrison had just confirmed that he'd been responsible for his wife's death. "James," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm and professional. "You're a trained psychiatrist. You understand the ethical implications of what you're doing. These people are patients, not experimental subjects. Ethics are a luxury we can't afford when we're talking about the evolution of human consciousness. Sarah, you of all people should understand. Your own abilities developed through trauma. Imagine if we could give people those same capabilities without requiring them to suffer first. By making them suffer in different ways. By understanding the neurological mechanisms that allow enhanced cognition to develop. Sarah, you could be part of this breakthrough. Your natural abilities combined with our enhancement protocols could make you the most cognitively advanced human being who has ever lived." Sarah looked at the research subjects who were becoming increasingly alert and aware of their surroundings. She thought about Morrison's definition of advancement, the ability to predict and manipulate, but at the cost of human connection and empathy. "James, I'm not interested in being advanced. I'm interested in being human." Morrison sighed as if Sarah had disappointed him personally. "Then I'm afraid you forced me to treat you as a hostile element." He nodded to the men in suits who began moving into the room with what appeared to be tranquilizer weapons. That's when Emma closed her eyes and whispered something Sarah couldn't quite hear. Suddenly, every piece of electronic equipment in the room began malfunctioning simultaneously. Monitors sparked and went dark. The automated medication dispensers began releasing their contents onto the floor. The reinforced door slammed shut, its electronic lock engaging with a finality that suggested it wouldn't be opening again anytime soon. And most importantly, the building's main electrical system failed, plunging the entire wing into darkness, except for the emergency lighting. "Emergency backup power has been compromised," came an automated announcement over the hospital's PA system. "All personnel evacuate to designated safety areas immediately." In the confusion and darkness, Sarah heard Morrison shouting orders, but his voice was being drowned out by the sound of the research subjects finally finding their voices. "Help us," Jessica whispered, her hand reaching for Sarah's. "Please help us get out of here." Sarah looked at Emma, barely visible in the emergency lighting, and realized that whatever was happening was no longer about their own survival. It was about making sure that Morrison's victims finally had a chance to tell their stories. "Emma, can you get us to that service tunnel you mentioned?" "Follow me, and Dr. Sarah bring them with us. All of them." As they helped the 6 research subjects to their feet, Sarah realized that what had started as a rescue mission had become something much larger. They weren't just escaping from Morrison. They were dismantling his entire operation, one victim at a time. The only question was whether they could reach safety before Morrison decided that eliminating all the evidence was worth the risk of multiple homicides. But as Sarah looked around at the faces of Morrison's victims, people who had been reduced to experimental subjects for months or years, she realized that the risk was worth taking. Some fights were worth fighting even when you couldn't be sure you'd win, especially when the people counting on you had already lost everything except the hope that someone would care enough to try. The service tunnel Emma led them through was a relic from the hospital's original construction in the 1940s, designed to transport bodies from the morgue without disturbing patients or visitors. The walls were lined with cracked tile, and the air carried the distinctive smell of old disinfectant, and something else. Something that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of preservation chemicals. 6 barely conscious research subjects moved slowly through the narrow space supported by Sarah and Emma. Jessica had regained enough awareness to whisper warnings about unstable areas in the tunnel floor. Marcus could sense the emotional distress of the group and was providing surprising comfort to the others despite his own trauma. Each of Morrison's victims was demonstrating that their enhanced abilities had survived his attempts to control them. "Emma," Sarah whispered as they navigated around a section where the ceiling had partially collapsed. "How much farther to the morgue?" "Maybe 50 yards. But Dr. Sarah, I need to tell you something about what happens when we get there." "What? The morgue connects to the main hospital, but Morrison will have anticipated that route. He'll have people waiting." Sarah paused, helping David Kim step over a puddle of stagnant water. "Then how do we get out?" "We don't run anymore. We fight back." Emma stopped walking and turned to face the group. In the dim emergency lighting, her face looked older than her 19 years, marked by a determination that Sarah had seen in her most successful trauma survivors. "Everyone, I need you to listen to me carefully. Dr. Morrison has been using our abilities against us for months or years. He's studied us, cataloged us, treated us like laboratory specimens. But he's made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" Marcus asked, his voice growing stronger. "He's never seen what we can do when we work together." Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device that Sarah recognized as a digital recorder. "For the past 6 months, I've been documenting everything Morrison has done, every conversation, every procedure, every violation of medical ethics and human dignity. Emma, even if you have recordings, Morrison has connections. He could claim we're all mentally unstable, that our testimony isn't reliable. He could try, but Dr. Sarah, there's something Morrison doesn't know about the people he's been targeting." "What illy?" "We're not just trauma survivors with enhanced abilities, we're also witnesses to his crimes, and some of us have been planning our revenge for a very long time." Emma led them to a section of the tunnel where the wall had a large metal grate. Beyond the grate, Sarah could see what appeared to be a sub-basement level of the main hospital. "Jessica, I need you to tell me what you see when you look through that grate." Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with the first clear, focused expression Sarah had seen from her. 3 security guards in the hallway beyond. Hospital security, not Morrison's people. They're genuinely concerned about the alarms and looking for survivors. "Perfect. Marcus, what are their emotional states?" Marcus concentrated his enhanced empathy, reading the guards' intentions. "Worried but not hostile. They want to help people, not hurt them." Emma removed the grate with practiced efficiency. "David, are there any immediate physical dangers in that hallway?" David Kim, whose enhanced ability involved detecting environmental hazards, shook his head. Clear path to the main elevator bank. No structural damage, no toxic exposures. Sarah watched in amazement as Emma coordinated the group's various abilities like a conductor managing an orchestra. Each person's trauma-induced enhancement complemented the others, creating a collective awareness that was far more powerful than the sum of its parts. Emma, how long have you been planning this? 2 years. Ever since I escaped the first time, I've been preparing to come back and free the others. But I needed someone on the inside, someone Morrison trusted to help me access his research and his victims. You've been manipulating me. Emma's expression softened. Dr. Sarah, I've been protecting you. Morrison has been planning to add you to his collection since your husband and son died. I got myself admitted to this hospital specifically to warn you and to gather evidence. They helped the research subjects through the grate and into the main hospital's basement. The familiar sounds of normal hospital activity, paging systems, equipment alarms, staff conversations, felt surreal after the nightmare they'd just escaped. Dr. Chen, are you all right? One of the security guards approached them, clearly recognizing Sarah, despite her disheveled appearance. Ma'am, we've been looking for you. Dr. Morrison reported that you and a patient had gone missing during the power failure. Officer, I need you to contact the FBI immediately. Dr. Morrison has been conducting illegal medical experiments on psychiatric patients. The guard looked skeptical, but before he could respond, Jessica stepped forward. Officer Matthews, she said, reading his name tag. You're going to receive a call from your supervisor in approximately 3 minutes. The caller will be FBI agent Sarah Williams, and she's going to ask you to secure this entire basement level as a crime scene. The guard stared at Jessica. How do you know that? Because I called Agent Williams 45 minutes ago and told her exactly when and where to find us. Sarah looked at Emma in amazement. You planned this. All of this. Not just me. All of us. Jessica has been using her precognitive abilities to coordinate the timing. Marcus has been reading Morrison's emotional state to predict his actions. David sensed the safest escape routes. Emma pulled out her phone and played a recording of Morrison's voice from earlier that evening. Those subjects require careful medical supervision. If you interfere with their treatment protocols, you could cause permanent damage or death. Emma, that recording could be interpreted as Morrison trying to provide legitimate medical care. By itself, yes. But I have hours of recordings, Dr. Sarah, including this one. Emma played another clip, this one from what sounded like a staff meeting. Subject acquisition has been accelerated. The Chen woman shows optimal enhancement potential, and the Walsh girl's return provides an opportunity to test our control mechanisms on a previously resistant subject. The security guard's expression changed as he listened to the recording. Ma'am, I'm going to need you and these people to stay right here while I contact my supervisor. As if summoned by Jessica's prediction, the guard's radio crackled to life. Matthews, this is dispatch. FBI agent Sarah Williams is en route to your location. Secure the basement level and don't let anyone leave until she arrives. The guard stared at Jessica with something approaching awe. How did you know? Officer Matthews, Jessica said calmly. You're about to learn that there are capabilities in the human mind that your training never covered, but I need you to understand something very important. What's that, dots? Morrison is going to try to convince you that we're all mentally ill, that our abilities are delusions, that we can't be trusted. But in about 90 seconds, you're going to witness something that proves otherwise. What am I going to witness? Marcus stepped forward, his enhanced empathy allowing him to read people's emotional states with startling accuracy. Officer Matthews, you're concerned about your daughter Emma. She's been having nightmares since your divorce, and you're worried that the custody arrangement isn't providing her with enough stability. The guard went white. How do you know about my daughter? Because emotional distress creates energy signatures that some people can read. Your daughter is 7 years old, she's afraid of thunderstorms, and she's been asking if you and your ex-wife are going to get back together. That's impossible. Officer Matthews, Emma said gently, everything you're about to learn tonight is going to challenge your understanding of what's possible. But I need you to remember that we're not dangerous. We're victims who have developed unusual abilities as a result of severe trauma. What kind of trauma? David Kim spoke for the first time since they'd escaped the basement. The kind of trauma that Dr. Morrison has been inflicting on purpose, trying to artificially create people like us. The sound of footsteps echoed through the basement corridor. Morrison appeared with his security team, but now they were accompanied by several people in FBI windbreakers. There they are. Morrison said, pointing at Sarah's group. "The patients I told you about. They're experiencing a group psychotic episode and may be dangerous to themselves and others." But Agent Sarah Williams, a woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with complex criminal investigations, looked at the group with evident skepticism about Morrison's claims. "Dr. Morrison, you reported a psychiatric emergency, but these people appear calm and coherent." "Agent Williams, they're exhibiting shared delusional symptoms. It's a well-documented phenomenon in institutional settings." Emma stepped forward. "Agent Williams, Dr. Morrison has been conducting illegal medical experiments on psychiatric patients for at least 2 years. We have documented evidence of his crimes." Morrison's expression hardened. "Emma Morrison is my stepdaughter. She has a history of paranoid delusions and has been resistant to treatment since her mother's death." "Agent Williams," Sarah said, "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, a licensed clinical psychologist on staff at this hospital. Morrison has been systematically drugging and abusing patients in an attempt to artificially induce enhanced cognitive abilities." Agent Williams looked between Morrison and Sarah's group, clearly trying to assess the credibility of competing claims. "Dr. Chen, do you have evidence to support these allegations?" Emma held up the digital recorder. "Everything is documented. Conversations, procedures, admissions of criminal activity." "That device could contain edited or fabricated recordings," Morrison said quickly. "Agent Williams, I strongly recommend that these individuals be placed in protective custody for psychological evaluation." That's when Jessica spoke up, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. "Agent Williams, in 30 seconds, you're going to receive a phone call from your field supervisor. The caller will inform you that a search warrant has been issued for Dr. Morrison's research facilities based on evidence provided by a confidential informant." Agent Williams stared at Jessica. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I called your supervisor 6 hours ago and provided him with the location of Morrison's illegal laboratory, along with detailed information about his research subjects." Morrison's face went white. "That's impossible. She's been in containment for months." "Actually, Dr. Morrison," Emma Say said, "Jessica has been conscious and aware the entire time you've been holding her. We've all been conscious, and we've been planning." Agent Williams' phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, then looked at Morrison with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to suspicion. "Dr. Morrison, you're under arrest for violation of federal laws regarding human experimentation. You have the right to remain silent." Morrison attempted to run, but David Kim had anticipated his movement. "Agent Williams, Dr. Morrison is going to try to access the stairwell behind you in approximately 3 seconds." Morrison made his move exactly as David had predicted, but Agent Williams was ready for him. As federal agents restrained Morrison, he looked at Sarah's group with something approaching hatred. "You have no idea what you're destroying," he said. "The research we've been conducting could have advanced human consciousness by centuries." "Dr. Morrison," Sarah replied, "consciousness that's built on the suffering of others isn't advancement. It's atrocity." As Morrison was led away, Agent Williams approached Sarah. "Dr. Chen, we're going to need complete statements from all of you. But first, do any of these people require immediate medical attention?" Sarah looked at the 6 research subjects who, despite months or years of abuse, were standing upright and alert, supporting each other with a solidarity that Morrison had never understood. "Agent Williams, they need medical evaluation, but not for the reasons Dr. Morrison would have claimed. They need treatment for the trauma he inflicted, not for their enhanced abilities." "Enhanced abilities?" Emma smiled. "Agent Williams, you're about to learn that the human mind is capable of far more than most people realize. And that trauma, while devastating, can sometimes unlock capabilities that seem impossible. Such as," Jessica stepped forward. "Agent Williams, you're going to receive a commendation for this case within 6 weeks. The Morrison investigation will lead to the discovery of a national network of illegal research facilities, and you'll be promoted to lead a new task force on psychiatric crimes." Agent Williams stared at Jessica. "How do you know that?" "Because some people can sense patterns in probability, especially when those patterns involve justice being served." 6 months later, Sarah sat in her new office at the FBI's Psychiatric Crimes Task Force, reviewing case files that would have seemed like science fiction a year earlier. The investigation into Morrison's network had revealed 12 illegal research facilities across the country, all conducting similar experiments on people with trauma-induced enhanced cognitive abilities. Emma knocked on her door, now serving as a consultant to the task force while completing her degree in psychology. At 19, she had become one of the world's leading experts on the intersection of trauma and enhanced human cognition. Dr. Sarah, the Minneapolis group, is here for their monthly check-in. The 6 research subjects from Morrison's basement had become powerful advocates for other survivors, using their enhanced abilities to identify ongoing crimes and help law enforcement protect vulnerable populations. Jessica had started a foundation that used her predictive abilities to prevent financial crimes against elderly and disabled people. Marcus worked with domestic violence counselors, using his enhanced empathy to identify dangerous situations before they escalated. David had joined the hospital safety board, using his hazard detection abilities to prevent accidents and equipment failures. "How are they doing?" Sarah asked. "Better than anyone expected. It turns out that when enhanced abilities are supported rather than exploited, they become tools for healing rather than sources of suffering." Emma sat down across from Sarah's desk. "Dr. Sarah, I need to tell you something." That night 8 years ago when your husband and son died, you said you had a feeling something was wrong, but you dismissed it." Sarah nodded, the memory still painful despite years of therapy. "Your feeling was accurate. Your enhanced abilities were trying to warn you. If you had trusted your intuition—" "Emma, are you saying I could have prevented their deaths?" "I'm saying your abilities were trying to protect your family. But Dr. Sarah, David's depression was so severe that even if you had prevented that particular incident, he might have found another way. You couldn't have saved him from his illness." Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 years: forgiveness for herself. "Emma, how do you know all this?" "Because precognitive ability isn't just about seeing the future. Sometimes it's about understanding the past, seeing the patterns that led to current outcomes." "And what do you see when you look at our future?" Emma smiled. "I see a world where people like us aren't victims or experimental subjects. I see a world where enhanced abilities are recognized as natural human potential that emerges from survival, not pathology. And Morrison's network, completely dismantled. But more importantly, the survivors are thriving. Turns out that people who develop enhanced abilities through trauma are remarkably resilient when they're given support instead of exploitation." Sarah looked out her office window at the Minneapolis skyline. The city looked the same as it had a year ago, but her perspective had changed completely. "Emma, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't fought back?" "No," Emma said without hesitation. "Because fighting back was always the only option. People like Morrison count on survivors to remain isolated, to doubt themselves, to accept their definitions of what's normal or possible. And now we define ourselves. And we use our abilities to protect other people from experiencing what we experienced." Emma stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Dr. Sarah, there's one more thing." What? "Agent Williams just called. They found another facility, this one in Denver. 15 subjects similar to Morrison's setup." Sarah felt the familiar surge of determination that had become her response to these discoveries. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning. Jessica already knows the optimal time to arrive. Marcus has a read on the emotional states of the staff, and David has identified the safest entry points." "And you?" Emma's smile was fierce and confident. "I've already ensured that several very unlikely coincidences are going to occur that will make the rescue much easier than it should be." As Emma left, Sarah reflected on the transformation that had occurred over the past 6 months. She had started as a psychologist who studied trauma. Now she was someone who used her own trauma-induced abilities to prevent others from experiencing similar victimization. Morrison had been right about one thing: enhanced cognitive abilities could revolutionize human consciousness, but he had been completely wrong about how. The revolution wasn't about creating superior humans through artificial trauma. It was about recognizing that people who survived trauma were already extraordinary, and that their abilities were gifts to be honored rather than experiments to be controlled. Sarah opened her laptop and began preparing for the Denver operation. 15 more victims were waiting for rescue, and she and her team had become very, very good at liberating people from facilities that weren't supposed to exist. The irony wasn't lost on her. Morrison had tried to create an army of cognitively enhanced individuals under his control. Instead, he had created an army of cognitively enhanced individuals committed to destroying people like him. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Denver facility will be evacuated by 3:47 p.m. tomorrow. Local FBI will arrive at 4:15 p.m. All subjects will be conscious and mobile by the time we reach them." Sarah smiled and typed back, "How do you know the subjects will be conscious?" Jessica's response came immediately because Emma is going to call the facility's head researcher in 20 minutes and convince him that his sedation protocols have been compromised by federal investigators. He'll reduce the medication levels to avoid detection. Sarah shook her head in amazement. Even after 6 months, the coordinated use of their abilities still felt like witnessing magic. But she'd learned that what appeared magical was actually the result of human consciousness, adapting to extreme circumstances in ways that medical science was only beginning to understand. Her computer chimed with an encrypted email from Agent Williams. The subject line read, "Congressional hearing, your testimony required." Sarah opened the message and read that Congress was convening hearings on illegal human experimentation with a focus on Morrison's network. They wanted Sarah, Emma, and the other survivors to testify about their experiences. Sarah thought about the implications. For the first time in history, people with trauma-induced enhanced abilities would have a platform to tell their stories to the nation's lawmakers. She picked up her phone and called Emma. "Dr. Sarah, is everything okay?" "Emma, how do you feel about testifying before Congress?" There was a pause. "I've been expecting that call. Jessica predicted it would come today." "And, Dr. Sarah, do you remember what you told me the night we escaped from Morrison? You said some fights are worth fighting even when you can't be sure you'll win." "I remember. This is one of those fights. If we can prevent even one more facility like Morrison's from operating, if we can help even one more person recognize their abilities as gifts rather than pathology, then it's worth the risk of public exposure." "Exactly. Besides, Dr. Sarah, I have it on very good authority that our testimony is going to change some very important minds." Jessica's authority. Jessica's authority. Sarah smiled. "Then I guess we're going to Washington." "Dr. Sarah." "Yes. Thank you for believing in us when everyone else saw only pathology, for fighting with us when it would have been easier to accept Morrison's version of reality, for helping us understand that survival isn't just about escaping, it's about making sure others don't have to experience what we experienced. Emma, thank you for teaching me that the abilities I developed after David and Tommy died weren't signs of mental instability. They were signs that I was stronger than I realized." After hanging up, Sarah walked to her office window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere in Minneapolis, there were people experiencing trauma who would develop enhanced abilities as a result. Some of them would be lucky enough to find support and understanding. Others might encounter predators like Morrison, who would see them as opportunities for exploitation. But now there was a network of survivors who had learned to use their abilities not just for survival, but for protection of others. People who understood that the most profound human capabilities often emerged from the deepest human suffering. Sarah's reflection was interrupted by her computer pinging with another encrypted message. This one was from Jessica, and it contained a single sentence. "Dr. Sarah, you should check the news. Morrison's sentencing hearing results are about to be announced." Sarah pulled up the news website and found the story. Dr. James Morrison had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for crimes against humanity. The judge had specifically noted that Morrison's research had violated every principle of medical ethics and human dignity. But the most important part of the story was the final paragraph. "The Morrison case has led to the establishment of the Enhanced Cognitive Abilities Protection Act, which recognizes trauma-induced enhanced cognition as a legitimate form of human neurodiversity rather than a psychiatric disorder. The Act provides legal protections for individuals with these abilities and establishes severe penalties for anyone who attempts to exploit or experiment on them." Sarah realized that Emma and the others had accomplished something remarkable. They had transformed their own victimization into legal protection for countless others. Her phone rang. "Agent Williams." "Dr. Chen, I wanted to personally thank you for your work on this case." "Agent Williams, we were just trying to survive." "Dr. Chen, you did much more than survive. You dismantled a network of predators and helped create legal protections that will prevent similar crimes for decades to come. What's next for the task force?" "We're expanding nationally. The Denver operation tomorrow is just the beginning. We've identified at least 30 more facilities that need investigation. And the survivors, they're being offered positions as consultants and investigators. Turns out that people with enhanced cognitive abilities are remarkably effective at identifying deception and predicting criminal behavior." After the call ended, Sarah sat in the gathering dusk of her office, processing the magnitude of what had been accomplished. A year ago, she had been a psychologist struggling with her own unrecognized trauma-induced abilities while unknowingly being targeted by a predator. Now she was part of a national effort to protect people with enhanced abilities and prosecute those who would exploit them. Her phone buzzed with one final message of the day, this one from Marcus Doctor. "Sarah, I wanted you to know that I can sense the emotional state of everyone in our group right now. For the first time since any of us can remember, we're all feeling the same thing, hope." Sarah smiled and typed back, "What kind of hope? Hope that we've turned our worst experiences into protection for others. Hope that Morrison and people like him will never again be able to treat human beings as experimental subjects. Hope that the abilities we developed through trauma will help us build a world where trauma is met with support rather than exploitation." Sarah looked out at the city lights coming on across Minneapolis. Tomorrow she would travel to Denver to liberate more of Morrison's victims. Next week she would testify before Congress about the realities of trauma-induced enhanced abilities. And in the months to come, she would continue working to ensure that people like Emma, Jessica, Marcus, and David were seen as the extraordinary survivors they were rather than the psychiatric cases Morrison had tried to make them. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, Sarah Chen felt truly at peace. She had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting trauma or returning to who you were before it happened. Healing was about transforming trauma into purpose survival, into protection of others, and extraordinary abilities into tools for justice. And sometimes when you were very lucky and very determined, healing was about discovering that the worst thing that ever happened to you could become the source of your greatest strength. Sarah gathered her files and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victims to rescue, new predators to stop. But tonight she would go home to her apartment, the same building where she'd lived with Marcus, but a different unit that held no trace of his manipulation, and she would sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Because monsters like Morrison could only succeed when their victims remained isolated and convinced of their own powerlessness. And Sarah Chen was no longer isolated. She was part of a network of survivors who had learned that their trauma-induced abilities weren't symptoms to be treated or experiments to be conducted. They were gifts to be honored, and weapons to be used against anyone who would victimize the vulnerable. Morrison had been right about one thing: people with enhanced cognitive abilities could change the world. He had just been completely wrong about who would be in control when they did. Epilogue. 1 year later, the congressional hearing room was packed with media lawmakers and advocates as Sarah took her place at the witness table. Beside her sat Emma, Jessica, Marcus, David, and 12 other survivors from facilities across the country. "Dr. Chen," the committee chair began, "in your professional opinion, how should society respond to individuals who develop enhanced cognitive abilities following severe trauma?" Sarah looked out at the audience, seeing faces that ranged from skeptical to curious to openly supportive. "Senator, I believe we should respond the same way we respond to any form of human neurodiversity, with acceptance, support, and recognition that different doesn't mean defective. And in terms of the abilities themselves," Sarah smiled, thinking of everything she and her colleagues had accomplished over the past year. "Senator, I believe we should recognize these abilities for what they are, evidence of the remarkable resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. People who develop enhanced cognition through trauma aren't broken individuals who need to be fixed. They're survivors who have developed extraordinary capabilities in response to extraordinary circumstances. Dr. Chen, some critics argue that these alleged abilities are simply manifestations of psychiatric illness. How do you respond to that?" Before Sarah could answer, Jessica leaned forward to her microphone. "Senator, in 30 seconds, your aide is going to hand you a note informing you that the vote on H.R. 2847 has been moved to 4:30 p.m. today instead of tomorrow morning." The senator stared at Jessica. "That's oddly specific." Exactly 30 seconds later, an aide approached the senator and handed him a folded piece of paper. The senator read it, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. "The note says that H.R. 2847's vote has been rescheduled to 4:30 p.m. today." "Senator," Emma said quietly, "psychiatric illness doesn't allow someone to predict specific future events with that level of accuracy. But trauma-induced neuroplasticity can create enhanced pattern recognition and probability assessment that appears predictive." "Are you saying these abilities are scientifically explainable?" "We're saying they're scientifically observable," Sarah replied, "and that the people who possess them deserve protection, not exploitation." The hearing continued for 3 hours, with each survivor demonstrating their abilities while explaining the trauma that had led to their development. By the end, even the most skeptical committee members were asking not whether the abilities were real, but how society could better support the people who possessed them. After the hearing, Sarah and Emma walked out of the Capitol building together, surrounded by reporters, but feeling oddly peaceful. "Emma, do you think we've actually changed anything?" Emma smiled, her enhanced abilities giving her insight into probability patterns that extended far into the future. "Dr. Sarah, I can see the ripple effects of what we did today. In 10 years, there will be entire university programs dedicated to studying and supporting trauma-induced enhanced cognition. In 20 years, people with abilities like ours will be working openly with law enforcement, disaster relief, and conflict resolution organizations around the world." And Morrison will spend the rest of his life in prison, watching the news coverage of everything we've built from the ashes of what he tried to destroy. As they walked away from the Capitol, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been a woman slowly losing her grip on reality under the systematic manipulation of a predator who saw her enhanced abilities as an opportunity for exploitation. Now she was a nationally recognized expert on trauma-induced enhanced cognition, helping to establish legal protections and support systems for people whose extraordinary abilities had emerged from their most difficult experiences. "Emma, what do you see when you look at our future?" Emma paused, her enhanced perception allowing her to sense probability patterns that stretched far beyond what most people could imagine. "I see a world where trauma is met with support instead of exploitation, where people who develop enhanced abilities are celebrated for their resilience instead of pathologized for their differences, where networks of survivors work together to protect the vulnerable instead of being isolated and controlled by predators." That sounds like a good world? It's the world we're building, Dr. Sarah, one survivor at a time. As they disappeared into the crowd of tourists and lawmakers surrounding the Capitol, both women carried with them the knowledge that they had transformed their own victimization into protection for countless others. Morrison had tried to break them. Instead, he had forged them into something he never could have imagined: survivors who refused to be broken, advocates who refused to be silenced, and guardians who would spend their lives ensuring that no one else would have to endure what they had survived. The predator had become the prey, the victims had become the victors, and the experiment had become the revolution. The end is. Thank you for following Sarah and Emma's incredible journey from victims to survivors to protectors. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation. Let me know in the comments, which moment impacted you most? Was it Sarah's realization of her own abilities, Emma's revelation of her true identity, or the final triumph over Morrison's network? Your engagement helps me create more content that explores the extraordinary strength of the human spirit.